Well, it promises to be the blockbuster event of the late summer. It's an action thriller where Chinese paratroopers come into America and basically at gunpoint force American workers in shackles into death factories where they're continually abused and tortured and maimed until there's nothing left but the outer husk, which is then recycled for more biomass to feed them during their 1 minute cafeteria break each day. Hi, everybody. I'm Bill Whittle and Steve Green here, and Scott Otter here with me, and this is the story about a movie called The Factory. I may have exaggerated slightly, but not by much. The reason we're talking about the story is because of the producers of this movie. It's a documentary movie. It's called The Factory, and it's about a plant that used to be a GM plant and was closed for several years. And then the Chinese company came in and decided to use the plant, reopen it, manufacture glass products. And this film is showing us how horrible it is to be employed again after 6 years of the Obama desert of unemployment. And the thing that's particularly interesting about a film about the 6 year desert of Obama's unemployment is that this film is produced by Obamas. Barack and Michelle both are the producers of this movie. So two different things to deal with here. Steve, let's start with you. This whole thing is designed, clearly designed, to show that Trump's so-called economic recovery and so-called record unemployment and so-called lowest ever discrepancy between black and white employment and so-called all of the things that Donald Trump has actually done. Needless to say, you can't simply sit there and take it because, as we all know, there's not just a button you can push to make prosperity happen. Barack Obama told us that himself. So the President of the United States is making a movie about how horrible it is to be working in an American factory. You're no longer getting paid $26 an hour. Now you're down to $12.95, and you don't get to unionize. And back in China, safety glasses are not being worn. This kind of nightmare. Care to comment?
Oh, so many things. I could talk about the fact, well, who made those jobs go away in the first place?
Well
That was a
said.
real bipartisan effort. I'm not blaming Barack Obama, but clearly he played his part in it. But this guy, he's a real Cincinnatus, isn't he?
He is.
Yeah,
He is.
he served his time in Washington, and then he returned to Kansas and his
Be-
plow.
became a farmer and was never heard from again.
Yeah. There's something to be said. The Roman Republic got all corrupt and decadent and turned into the empire, which got even more corrupt and decadent. But for a time there, the leaders really knew how to behave, didn't they? Which was to
They
serve their
did.
time and then return to their estate and mind their own business. You
Well,
know,
they also learned how to behave here in America, which I think needs pointing out. You know, th-
yeah, oh yeah.
this isn't something that happened in Rome. You did your duty as president and disappeared. I mean, that was the history of the 43 prior presidents,
You know,
wasn't it?
More or less, Reagan took a lot of heat, and I think deservedly so. After he left office, he went on a little speaking tour of Japan, and he got paid what is today a piddling $2 million. And the left raked him over the coals. There were people like me who were just sorely disappointed that a principal president would cash out like that. But that's nothing compared to what the Bill Clinton has done with Hillary and this Clinton Foundation and all the rest, where they rake in hundreds of millions of dollars peddling influence. I mean that they don't produce anything, they don't do anything. They peddle influence for big dollars. The Obamas got picked up by Netflix for was it nine figures? It was eight or nine figures. It's just huge sums of money. $10 million, $100 million, whatever it was. It was a huge sum of money that Netflix is paying the Obamas to produce propaganda films that Netflix will then air to peddle a political agenda. It's just insane. Glenn Reynolds had an idea years ago. He calls it the revolving door surtax, where, okay, fine, you did your public service, you're out on the street, but your income you get from peddling your influence is going to be taxed at 90%. Fine, let's do that. We've got to disincentivize public office as a means to riches. I think it may be the number one moral crisis in this country. The opioid crisis is bad. The suicide crisis is bad. Everything else is bad. But I think that this ability to peddle influence to the tune of tens or hundreds of millions of dollars after you left office is the absolute worst moral crisis facing this country, and it's destroying us from within.
Scott, I got to tell you, it's not the money that bothers me about this. I mean, if Barack Obama had gone off and started a llama farm or selling alpacas or something, and he was making $100 million, I'd have no problem with that whatsoever. It's the political influence. It's the fact that he is now using movies to basically undermine a sitting president. And this is the entire problem, for me anyway, is that presidents up until Barack Obama have not ever undermined a sitting president. They know how difficult that job is, and they know that when you're finished as president, that's basically the end of your political commentary. And he's not willing to do this because he's different than all the other presidents, as he's taken every single possible opportunity to let us know.
Well, I believe it was John Quincy Adams that returned to Congress after his service as President of the United States. So I'm not nearly as strict with our former presidents as to whether they have the right to comment. I think they do. I don't think you give up your rights as a citizen just by becoming a president. I'm sure it's a gentlemanly thing to do, and that's the precedent that's been set by most of our previous presidents. But Bill, it strikes me that this particular film, as the debut of the Barack and Michelle Obama production team, is just the perfect continuation of the Obama administration. I mean, after all, what is a documentary but a story? And what story did we hear during the Obama administration other than that America is on the decline, that American big businesses have failed us, that foreign countries, frankly, know how to do things better than we do and are coming in and showing the Americans how to do it. But even then, it gets worse. And I think that's the credo of the Obama administration. It gets worse. And we want to make sure that we can really tell this story over and over again. I mean, think about this. You were president of the United States. Do you start a documentary film company or a partnership with a major distributor and say, you know what I want to do? I want to tell the stories of great Americans who overcome and who triumph in the face of adversity. I want to do profiles in courage. I want to make stories that show what this country could be. I mean, let's grant the fact that President Obama was never completely satisfied with the roots of the country or the fruits of the country, but he got to the point where he would say, you know what, let's cast a vision here. I failed to do this during my administration. I just ran the country down. Now let's cast a vision of how this country could overcome these things and be greater. But instead, in his first thing out the gate, the first documentary, it's about failure and despondency and just the grinding, awful situation that you're in if you live in the United States of America.
I think that's exactly right. And I'd like to apologize to our viewers at home. I know I'm changing color like a chameleon. I don't know what's going on, but nevertheless, there it is. Look, what this movie says is actually very clear. And what the movie says is it's better to be unemployed than to be employed. There's no question about it. This movie is talking about the degradation in lifestyle from a plant that closed 7 years ago to one that opened under Donald Trump. And the argument is that this work environment is so awful. It's only $13 an hour instead of $26, and you don't get to unionize. None of the things that make life worth living. It's better to be unemployed. That's really what it says. I don't know if I agree with that particular idea, and I'd also would like to think that just without question, Donald Trump has the instincts for this. But if this thing does get any traction, and I'm absolutely sure it will not, but if it did, I think it would be exactly like Donald Trump to bring 15 or 20 people who work at that factory that is the subject of this documentary and have them come on camera and tell them how much better their life is now that they're working and earning paychecks as opposed to the 6-7 years when this thing was closed during the previous administration. I think that's absolutely it. And the idea that a sitting president would do something this low just reminds me about where this guy came from. And no, I don't mean Kenya. I mean he is a community organizer. That was the only job he ever had. The other word for community organizer, the word we used to use, is agitator. And that's what this is. It's agitation. It's manipulating people to feel like things are worse being employed under Donald Trump than they were being unemployed under Barack Obama. And I just don't think that's true. And I don't think most of the people in this country think that's true. And I think it's yet another case for understanding that that Netflix, I hope they spent $300 million on them, because that's $300 million they couldn't spend on somebody more effective. And it's just another example of the, get woke, go broke. I really, really, really think that's the case. We'll see how it does. I don't imagine it's going to be a sensation. But if it is, I get the feeling that we finally have a president who understands enough about how these things work to be able to not only put up a defense against it, but to utterly, utterly hoist it on its own petard. And you can look that up, you young people. That'll do it for this edition of Right Angle, made possible by the paying members of BillWhittle.com. If you'd like to be one of us, we'd love to have you. We say that every single time, but honestly, it is this show is watched by 20,000 people, usually on average, and 2,000, 3,000 people pay for it. That's not right. And so we're very grateful to those people, and we'd love to have you become one of them as well. For Steve Green and Scott, I'm Bill Whittle. We'll see you next week on Right Angle.